architecture for everything that our customers want.
That's great. No, it's crazy. Yannick, before, I'd say just over a year ago, you and me probably wouldn't be speaking today. It's interesting how the Microsoft ecosystem has all come together all of a sudden. It's been a lot of years of effort, but myself was primarily from a Dynamics background. But now with the Power Platform and the Graph API and the whole ecosystem coming together into one single unified platform, it really is a massive game changer, really. And but yes, so it's a great pleasure to welcome you today to the event. And without further ado, I'm handing over to Yannick.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So for the people joining late, I'm not sure if there are any. I'm Yannick Reekmans. I'm a cloud solution architect from Belgium. And welcome to my session, Microsoft Teams for Developers in Introduction. You can find my Twitter handle and the URL to my blog on the slides. You can reach out. You can reach out on LinkedIn as well. So every link to my socials is on the blog. So just feel free to ask me any questions. There will be room for questions after this session normally. And feel free to put them in the chat during the session, and I'll hope to get them answered by the end of this session. So, whoa, this is going very fast. I'm going back a couple slides. So, first of all, the agenda. Today, I'll start with a small introduction, and then I'll be covering what we mean when we talk about Microsoft Teams as a service and Microsoft Teams as a platform. And then in the end, I'll help you get started in your own journey to become a Microsoft Teams developer, and we'll do a little wrap up at the end. So today, this session, it's always good to set some expectations. It is a level 100 introduction to the extensibility points of Microsoft Teams. Stefano said that we'll be diving very deep into this. We'll be covering every way to extend Microsoft Teams itself or extend your own applications with Microsoft Teams, but there won't be many code. So I won't be showing you how to build it. There will be great sessions during the rest of the day that will actually build stuff. I will just be showing you all of the extensibility points that are available. And we'll check out the SDKs and tools and the samples and templates that will help you get started with your own development. So moving on. First of all, let's take a look at how Microsoft positioned Teams when they launched it. So at launch in 2016, so that's about 4 years ago, they positioned it as the chat-based workspace in Office 365, bringing together people, conversation, and content. The Wikipedia definition also adds video meetings and application integration to that definition. And as a result, it ended up being too bulky and not catchy enough for marketing. So they simplified it to just the hub for teamwork. Now, the hub for teamwork, it's a cool marketing slogan, but it doesn't really say anything. But it shows up everywhere. And more recently, they switched it up to start using more and more Microsoft Teams as a service and Microsoft Teams as a platform. But it's not really clear what it means. So I'll be trying to clarify this during the next 40-45 minutes. Looking at Microsoft Teams as a service, it is all about extending your own application with functionalities from Microsoft Teams. So we'll take some functionality that's available in Microsoft Teams and you bring it inside your own applications. And then on the other end, you've got Microsoft Teams as a platform. And that's where you extend the Microsoft Teams clients itself and bring your application inside the Microsoft Teams clients. Starting with Microsoft Teams as a service, it's all driven by Microsoft Graph. Like Stefano already said, all the interactions between your application and the functionalities of Teams is done through the APIs exposed in Microsoft Graph. Not sure if coming from the background of Dynamics 365, there's not much that's already available in Microsoft Graph for Dynamics. So you might not be really familiar with the Microsoft Graph, but the aim of Microsoft Graph is to be one API endpoint to rule them all. It exposes the data inside your Microsoft 365 environment through a set of APIs that enable you to build applications that can interact with this data. So the idea here is to be a major improvement over your for what we had before, where we had different APIs for each workload, all with their own approaches and authentication. So the goal for Microsoft Graph is to bring together Teams APIs, but also Exchange, SharePoint, Planner, everything that's available within Microsoft 365, and by extension, hopefully in the future also Dynamics 365. So you only have one authentication method, one way of accessing all the data inside of your environments. Now, taking Microsoft Teams as a service and taking and looking at those and the APIs that exist, I like to split these services APIs into two categories. First of all, there are the management APIs. The management APIs, they exist to manage resources that exist in Microsoft Teams. And resources in this context mean teams and groups, but also owners and members, channels, tabs, and applications, and even shifts in Microsoft Shifts. So most of these endpoints, they support the standard list, create, read, update, and delete actions, and some have even more advanced actions available. So using these APIs, you can create an external application, for example, a provisioning tool that collects information from the end users in some sort of form, uses all of that information to create a team with the correct configuration, the right amount of channels, the correct members in there, and things like that. So you can create a personalized experience using these management APIs. And on the other end, you've also got the communication APIs. And the communication APIs, they exist to allow your application to participate in conversations. So using these APIs, your application can list and read and send chat messages in Teams, but also in group chats and one-on-one chats. And they can also manage calls by answering and rejecting them, muting and unmuting participants, adding and removing participants from the conversation, and even create an additional Microsoft Teams meeting, for example, creating an invite in your agenda with a Microsoft Teams meeting link embedded in there as well. And one of the newer ones is the ability to get the presence information for your users. So this would allow your application to listen to like the status or the presence information for a user, like if a user is away or available in a call, do not disturb. So you can subscribe to the presence information changing, but also just fetching the information to visualize in your own applications, for example. And Microsoft Teams as a service is mostly do-it-yourself. So there are a lot of management APIs, but you have to build your own application. There are a lot of applications and samples available from Microsoft and in the community, but we all know that they almost never cover our specific use cases. So they exist as a good example, but you still have your own thing to do. Most of the time you get something similar, but your own business case or your own use case is a little bit different. They go from lightweight up to very heavy. And with these APIs, you have unlimited possibilities. One of the downsides of Teams in Microsoft Graph is that some of the endpoints are still in beta only, and they are rather slow from moving from beta into V1. So it's something to be aware of, that some things only exist in the beta endpoint of Microsoft Graph, and the Teams team isn't the fastest to move them into V1. And the communications APIs are just very recent additions. There are almost no ready-made solutions available or reference solutions available, and some of those endpoints are still in beta only. But the team that's working on this is a bit faster in getting their APIs into the V1 endpoint. So a lot of things that I mentioned and that you saw on the previous slide are available right now. Now, switching to Microsoft Teams as a platform, remember, this is where we bring our applications inside the familiar fabric of the Microsoft Teams client. We divide this platform ability into 4 categories. They range from left to right on this slide, and they go from simple and easy to build, install, and manage to the more complex open source applications to everything you have to build from scratch. So looking at the first category is the ready-made solutions. Ready-made solutions are basically the applications that are currently already available in the Microsoft Teams store today. So there are hundreds of Microsoft and partner-made applications that are delivered through the Microsoft Teams store. You just go into the store, you select an application, and with minimal effort have new functionality added to a team or group chat or even in your personal scope. Of course, they can be managed on a tenant level as well. So this screenshot shows you some applications that might not be all available in your environment because your administrators might have turned off some of those integrations on your environment. And then there's probably the things that are interesting to this audience is the ability to integrate the low-code Power Platform inside Microsoft Teams. There's a lot of effort, a lot of push from Microsoft to increase this interaction with Microsoft Teams. So you can embed your Power App as a tab in Team, but also as a personal app. And you can also interact with the out-of-the-box connectors that are available in Power Apps and Power Automate. This is a rather old screenshot already with just a simple action to post a message inside the channel in Microsoft Teams, but there are a lot of other connectors available already. And with the release notes of Wave 2 and build last month, a lot of improvements were already announced to increase the interaction between Power Apps and Teams. And then the third category is the reference solutions. They are also known as the app templates. This is what I believe a hidden gem of the Microsoft Teams team, because they're basically production-ready, community-driven, and open-source applications that are readily made available on GitHub. So they cover a wide range of use cases, and they come with a step-by-step installation instruction. They do require some technical expertise, as you might need to compile the code yourself or install some resources in Azure. But all of these solutions, they come with detailed documentation, support through the issues list on GitHub. And the nice thing is that if they don't completely cover your needs, you can just customize them or extend them or use them as an example for your own applications. These reference solutions are made available to cover use cases like the incentives app or the icebreaker bot. They show off cool functionality that you can use as is, but also as a building block for your own applications. And I'm listing some on here, but there are a lot more that are being created almost every week, 2 weeks. One of the special one that I want to mention here is the request a Teams team application that's made available, which is built on Power Apps and Flow or Power Automate. So you can just use that to guide your own provisioning system or provisioning approach to not use the out-of-the-box approach. And that's just made available on GitHub. And then the last category are the custom-built applications. This is where you bring your existing or new solutions to Microsoft Teams. And to surface your application in Teams, it needs an interface. So that's either a tab or a bot, an adaptive card, a messaging extension, or a task module. You can use connectors and webhooks or do some notifications. And then, of course, there is a backend. We see most of the applications that are built use a backend on Azure for the custom code. They interact with Microsoft Graph to get data out of the environment, build some resources on SharePoint, integrate with Power Apps and Flow. So those are the building blocks, but of course, you can use any other backend system that you'd like. And then you connect it to Microsoft Teams. Looking at these custom-built applications, they exist out of 3 parts. So it's a custom-built application exists out of the part that we actually call the Teams application. The Teams application is a zip file. It's a zip file that contains 3 files. So it's rather simple and small. 2 of them are just icons, the color icon and the outline icon. The color icon is used in the store and in the flyout menu on the left-hand side. The outline icon is used on the left app rail when you pin your application into the left rail. And then the manifest file. I'll dive deeper into it on the next slide, but the manifest file is the JSON file that describes all the functionality that you want to expose in Microsoft Teams. Then there's the app registration. So depending on the functionality that you want to deliver in the Microsoft Teams clients, you might have to register your application in one of the many portals that Microsoft uses. So there's the Azure AD app registration if you want to do single sign-on or just authentication in your application. If you're building a bot or a messaging extension, you have to register your application with the bot framework. And if you're doing an Outlook connector, you have to go into the Outlook dev portal to register your application in there as well. And then, of course, the most important part is your application logic itself. We see most of the time that it's a web application combining server-side and client-side logic, or just using one or the other, or just a web service, a basic web service that responds to queries that you send in that direction. I mentioned the manifest. So the manifest is quite important piece of the Teams application. So the manifest file, it describes all the functionality that's available. So it has some common information like the developer name, URL, organization that provides this application. You can put in some localization information. So if your Teams app supports multiple languages like English, or in this case, it supports Spanish as well. You provide a name and a description, the link to the icons, and some accent color to just make your application pop out in the Microsoft Teams store. And then on the bottom, the empty arrays describe all the functionality that's available. We'll cover those when we cover all the extensibility points. And then one of the last things to know is that a custom-built application in Microsoft Teams can be delivered into two scopes. So there is the team scope and the personal scope. Applications that are created in the team scope are supposed to surface information that is relevant to a group of people. So applications in the team scope can be added to Teams, a group chat, and as a tab in Teams, or like a bot conversation with multiple people. And it's supposed to surface information that's relevant for the whole group of people. Now, in the personal scope, if you put your applications in the personal scope, it's supposed to surface information that is just relevant to the one user that put it in the personal scope. So it's a personal installation of your application. And it also works in a one-on-one bot conversation. A good example here is a Microsoft Planner app that got recently renamed to the Tasks app, I believe. So if you put this in the team scope, it will show all the tasks that are available to the team or the group of people. But if you put it in the personal scope, it shows up in your left rail, and it only shows the tasks that are assigned to you. Of course, you can create an application like the Microsoft Planner app that combines the personal and the team scope. Now, let's dive into each extensibility point. So first of all, and probably the most used one, the most popular extensibility point, is a Teams tab. So a Teams tab is a canvas, and it's in essence just an embedded web page. The Teams clients will show your website or your web application in some sort of an iframe. First of all, you can create or use your existing website or web application that already exists and put it in the iframe. Now, that's not very useful yet because there's no interaction with the Teams clients at that point. But you could create or use the JavaScript SDK for tabs and integrate it into your website, and then register or call some API endpoint to make sure that your website is aware of the Teams context. In that way, your Teams tab can request context-aware information from the Teams client. So it can know if it's in a one-on-one chat or in a team. It can fetch all the members of a team, all the owners of a team, even interact with the settings of the team. So it can do a lot of context-aware information. It can link with deep links to other functionality in the Teams client. So it can be a very powerful way of creating a canvas, a full screen application right inside the Teams client that can take the context of the Teams client and surface relevant information to the group of people. A Teams tab supports a content page. This is the one that you see on the screen, and the content page is supported both in the personal app as well as in the Teams app or the Team scope. Now, in the Team scope, you can also create a configuration page and a removal page. Now, the configuration page is the page that shows up in the pop-up. If you add a tab to Teams, a lot of these applications show you a pop-up first requesting some more information. So you can create that as well for your custom application. And then if you remove the tab from Teams, it can pop up an additional removal page as well, maybe requesting some information about, can we keep your personal information that we stored while you're using the Teams tab or not? And depending on whatever the user answers, you can clean up their personal information, yes or no. Since a Teams tab is just a web application, you can use any web application framework that you'd like to build this Teams tab. The JavaScript or the SDK for tabs is a JavaScript API and a JavaScript file that you can include in your HTML. But for everything else, you can build with whatever framework that you'd like. So you can use Node.js and React, which is one of the most popular frameworks that we see, but you could also use C# and ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET MVC. And for those people that have experience with the SharePoint framework to build applications for SharePoint online, you can also use the SharePoint framework to create these types of Teams tabs. In the manifest, it looks like this. So you got two parts that are related to tabs. One is the configurable tabs. Those are available in the team and the group chat scope. And you provide the configuration URL, and that's everything that needs to be handled there. And then the static tabs are the personal tab or the personal app. Everything you put in there will be surfaced as a personal application. Don't be fooled, the static tabs is an array, but it only allows you to put in one item. You can only have one personal scoped application inside one Teams application. You can have multiple configurable tabs for a team. And then the second most popular one are conversational bots. At this point, basically everyone is building bots, and you can build bots as well that integrate into Microsoft Teams. And a bot is as simple as something that you register with the bot framework. You use the bot framework v4 SDK, and you interact or connect your bot with a publicly accessible web service. So what it does is you send, or the user sends some query to the bot, and the bot accepts it. So it gets sent to your web service. Your web service does some processing, and it answers with a response. And that response can either be just text. It can be an interactive card or even a task module. And a task module is a pop-up, I'll cover it later, that requests more information, for example. If you start building bots for Microsoft Teams, use the bot framework v4. It's the only one that's supported at the moment, and make sure to use at least v4.6 because it integrates all of the Teams APIs or context-aware information directly in the bot framework APIs. I saw some people building Power Virtual Agents bots as well that can be surfaced inside Microsoft Teams. I haven't tried it yet, but I know that Louise Freze has a session about that as well. You can probably find it on the internet somewhere. And for a conversational bot, the manifest looks like this. So you need a bot ID from the bot framework, and then you need to say in which scope this bot is available. So in this case, this bot is available in the team scope, the personal scope, and in the group chat. And then you provide the commands. And this is a bit special because in the command list, you can differentiate again. So you can surface like commands that are only available in a specific scope. So some commands here are only available in the team and the group chat scope, and other commands are only available in the personal and group chat scope. So you can create just one bot and differentiate depending on where this bot is being used. Third custom build application or third extensibility points are the messaging extensions. And messaging extensions, it's even less used than bots. And this one allows you to extend the search bar on the top of your Teams client. On the more actions menu specific on the message, and the message compose box where you type a reply or you start a new conversation, you can extend that as well with your own functionality. So looking at messaging extensions, they come in 3 flavors. The first one being an action-based command. So an action command allows you to present your users with a model pop-up to collect or display information. When they submit this form, your web service can respond then by inserting a message into the conversation directly, or by inserting a message into the compose message area. So you can tweak the input, or you can type another message with it as well, and then send it into the conversation. These action-based messaging extensions, they can be triggered from all the 3 extensibility points. So they can be triggered from the compose message area, from the command box on top of your Teams client, and from a specific message. When you trigger them from a message, the whole message will be included in the payload that gets sent to your web service. And messaging extensions, they are built on the bot framework v4 as well. So you need to register a messaging extension with the bot framework and provide the ID inside the manifest file. So that makes sense. If you look at this manifest file, once again, you need the bot ID, and then you see the command being of type action, and then some parameters that can be passed in, and then the context where it's made available. In this manifest, it's only made available in the message scope, so on a specific message, but like I said, it can be on the message area and the command box as well. Second of those messaging extensions are the search-based messaging extensions. So search commands allow your users to search an external system. Like you see on the screenshot, this is interacting in the message compose area, where your user then can search some sort of reporting application, line of business application, surfacing reports that are available in there. So what it does is your web service receives the query from the user and then searches through that external system and responds with 2 responses to the Teams client. So the first support or the first response is a preview list, so small cards that show in this pop-up to show some small information to the user that they know which report they want to include. And then a bigger preview card that when a user selects something out of this list, the bigger preview card will be, or the full size card will be rendered in the compose message area. Now, these search-based messaging extensions can only be triggered from the compose message area and from the command box. They cannot be triggered from specific messages. And like with all messaging extensions, this is built on the bot framework. Looking at the manifest, it looks very similar to the previous one, only the type is changed to search. And in this case, the context is compose and command box. So put them on all the available and supported scopes. Like I said, messages is not supported here. And then the last one, this one can be very powerful as well. This is a link unfurling. And link unfurling allows you to render a detailed card for a specific URL. So imagine you have a line of business application running on some sort of your subdomain inside of your environment, but you want to render some cool looking cards inside Microsoft Teams as well. This is where link unfurling comes in. So link unfurling is a technology that's used by, for example, GitHub or Azure DevOps or Twitter. So if you insert a Twitter link inside Teams or inside Facebook, it renders a specific card that also already gives some context information. So you can do this as well for your own line of business applications, like with Lucidchart. In this case, you put in your manifest file. I'll show you. So in the manifest file, you put the domain that you want to listen to. And when a URL for this domain is put inside a message, this message is sent to your web service, and you can fetch the information from the external system and respond with an interactive card for this website. You can even include buttons to put in actions or do some advanced stuff there. Of course, this can only be triggered from the compose message area. It doesn't really make sense to trigger this from a command box or a message anyway. And as usual with messaging extensions, these are built on the bot framework v4. then the two last parts, these are more supporting technologies. And the first one is a task module, which is a model pop-up. And it's a tab in the pop-up, so it uses the Teams tab infrastructure to create its look and feel. So you can invoke a model pop-up or task module from a tab, a bot, or even externally. So each model dialog or task module can have a deep link associated with it. So you can just put it on your website or something, or in your internal intranet. And when people click the link, Teams will open directly on this model dialog. The technology behind this is custom HTML and JavaScript in some sort of iframe-based widget using the Teams tab infrastructure, but you can also render the look and feel with adaptive cards. Now, adaptive cards are a declarative UI. So it's a JSON object that describes how your UI should look, but not, or at least which functionality should be on there, but not how it's styled. So an adaptive card is styled by the hosting application. So if you use a JSON object to describe that there needs to be a button and some labels and some text and maybe even an image, then you send this JSON object to the hosting application, and the hosting application will render it with the look and feel that fits their look and feel. So you can see some examples on the left. The same card that gets sent to Skype, Android, iOS, or Teams, or even the notification system in Windows, will be rendered specifically to that use case and to that hosting application. It is the same JSON object for all of these 5 examples, for example. In Teams, there are 3 card types that are supported. There are connector cards. Those cards were created specifically for Outlook connectors. There's also the bot framework cards that are supported within the bot framework. So for messaging extensions or for bots, you can use some of the simple bot framework cards as well. But those two are very specific technology. They're not cross-platform and cross-product. So if you have to start new, please use the adaptive cards, which is the new or like the next generation of these connector cards and bot framework cards. That is an open source technology that's made available by Microsoft. It's driven by Microsoft, but it gets integrated in more and more third-party products as well. And these adaptive cards can be used in connectors, bots, messaging extensions, and in task modules as well, of course. And then the last part, and these are a little bit more techy, are the webhooks and connectors. So first of all, you've got the outgoing webhooks. Outgoing webhooks is in essence a web service that you make available. And then you go into Teams and you say that you want to register your outgoing webhook in a specific team or a specific channel. And you say, my webhook or my web service exists at this URL. And then you give your URL a name. The user itself can go into a message, a compose box, and then type and mention your name for your web service. Everything that the user types after it gets sent into your web service. And then your web service can process that information and respond with, like I said, text or an adaptive card or some interaction possibility. Downside of an outgoing webhook is that there is no custom configuration page. So your web service will be as it is. There's no way to tweak the configuration depending on the team where you register your web service. And it also cannot be packaged as a Teams application. So remember the zip file from in the beginning. It doesn't exist in this case for outgoing webhooks. That means that if you need your outgoing webhook or your web service or that functionality available in more than one channel, you need to register this web service in all of these channels and all of these teams separately. The other option is an incoming webhook. And that's where you go into the Microsoft Teams client and you create an incoming webhook, and then Teams will create a URL that's exposed to the internet and where your application can send information. So it's an exposed URL that accepts messages. So your application just sends a payload, for example, an adaptive card to that incoming webhook, and then Teams will just render it inside the UI. The same downsides exist here as well. So you cannot have a custom configuration page and it cannot be packaged as a Teams application. So that also means that if you need more teams with an incoming webhook, or your application needs to send information to different teams inside your organization, an incoming webhook has to be created for each team separately. As a result, your application needs to handle more than one URL because all of those incoming webhooks will have a separate URL. So you have to manage all of these URLs in your custom application. Now, to resolve this, there's also the Office 365 connector. An Office 365 connector is a special type of incoming webhook. So it's in essence still a web service on your end, and it's still a URL that's exposed to the internet, but it does allow a custom configuration page and it can be packaged as a Teams application. And this is because it leverages the Office 365 connector possibilities, where you go into the Outlook online dev portal and you register your webhook in there. And then you put that configuration inside a manifest file, like here. So you put it as a connector, you put the connector ID from the connector dev portal, and you can provide the configuration URL inside the manifest. And then Teams will send the information or listens to the information on that URL. So this covered all of the extensibility points that are available in Microsoft Teams. So last thing to see is, what do you need to get started? Of course, you now have big ideas on how you can integrate your own applications into Microsoft Teams with one of these extensibility endpoints, but you dread writing the manifest file yourself or creating the supporting like application infrastructure for this manually. You can do that. It's a lot of work, and luckily there are some ways to get some scaffolding done by some tooling. First of all, there's the Yeoman generator for Microsoft Teams. The Yeoman generator for Microsoft Teams is an open source community-driven project. It's within the Patterns and Practices team that started from SharePoint, but it's now more broad Microsoft 365. And it's tooling that's created by Victor Reland first, and it exists for 1.5 to 2 years, maybe even longer than that. And it's very stable, and it allows you to create a tab, a bot, messaging extension, outgoing webhooks, and Office 365 connector, and it does support localization. What it doesn't do is the manifest file. So it generates for you the manifest file, but it doesn't really support with the UI interface adjusting that manifest file. For that, I suggest you use the Microsoft Teams App Studio. The Microsoft Teams App Studio is an application that is available inside the Microsoft Teams store, and you can add it to your Teams client to use and edit your Teams applications. Combining these two, it's a very strong and very functional way to quickly get started in your own development. The Yeoman generator generates TypeScript files, interacts with ngrok for your local hosting of your Teams application and for debugging right inside Visual Studio Code. Now, while this existed for 2-3 years already, it's used a lot by the community. Last month at Build, Microsoft decided that it wants to put out a first-party way to do this. So they launched the Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code that this week got G8 as well. And this Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code is an add-in or an extension for Visual Studio Code that can generate a tab, a bot, and a messaging extension. So remember that the Yeoman generator can do more extensibility points than Visual Studio Code. So I still recommend the Yeoman generator, specifically because the Visual Studio Code extension generates not TypeScript, but it generates JavaScript files, which is a very strange decision by Microsoft, since everything else that they do is TypeScript based. Now their toolkit for Visual Studio Code generates JavaScript files. And this week also they put in preview the Microsoft Teams app for Visual Studio. Now the Teams app for Visual Studio supports the same functionalities as the Visual Studio Code extension. So just a tab, a bot, and a messaging extension. And it's built on C# and ASP.NET Core 3.1. I tried it last night and it's still a bit buggy, but that's why it's preview. So my current recommendation is please try out the Yeoman generator combined with the Microsoft Teams App Studio. The support is a lot better at the moment. The functionality is a lot further developed already. So I think that's the best way to get started. I still have some time available, so I'll try and show if my computer wants to work. I'll try and show how this works. So first of all, there is the Yeoman generator. So there is this, the Yeoman generator is built, the Yeoman generator for Microsoft Teams is built on Yeoman. Yeoman is a generation platform that allows you to create your own generators. For those that created the SharePoint, already created SharePoint framework applications, know that the SharePoint generator is also built on Yeoman. So the easiest thing you have to do, it's a bit slow, I'm not sure why, is you just type Yo inside of your terminal, and then it will load the Yeoman generator and load all the generators that are available. So give it a while, it's still thinking, it's getting there. So what it will do is find all the generators that are installed on your system. Currently, I have only the Teams generator installed. So you can launch a Teams generator by just entering again. And you can, like this generator helpfully tells you, is you could also just do Yo Teams. If you do Yo Teams, you go directly into the Teams generator. So the Teams generator, when it's loading, it will ask you some amount of questions, like what is your solution name? It tries to find this from the directory where you're launching your generator. So I'll just do that. Use the current folder, give it a name. I'll leave the company name and then the manifest version. So the Yeoman generator currently supports the manifest versions of v1.5 and 1.6, 1.6 being the latest. And then there's also a dev preview version of the manifest file. For production applications, I suggest you use 1.5 or 1.6. If you need some functionality that's only available in dev preview, you can use that one as well. But for your applications to work, you need to put your Teams client into dev preview mode as well. So we'll take 1.6, we skip the partner ID. And like you see here, you can just toggle everything that you need in this project. So you can say, I need a bot, an outgoing webhook or not, a connector, a messaging extension, and localization support. Now, we'll take just a tab. You need a URL. It helpfully suggests a default URL, but this might not be available because it just suggests something on Azure websites. It asks some other questions. Let's skip testing. Who needs testing anyway? We don't do telemetry, and we give it a tab name. We'll keep it like this. If it doesn't support like this, you say if it's configurable or personal. We'll do everything like this. Just enter, 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 and then it scaffolds all the information inside of your Microsoft, inside of your directory. So it creates all the files that are necessary, and then it will try and install all the npm packages that are necessary to build this. At the end, you can do gulp build and gulp run, and then you can use Visual Studio Code to do your debugging. So I'm going to switch out because this will take some time. I'm going to switch to the App Studio. So inside of Microsoft Teams, so with Teams like this, there is a way to find with the behind the three dots, you can find all the applications that you have installed. This is the overflow menu, and it shows the color icon. And there's also the more apps which bring you to the store. Now in the store, there is this Microsoft Teams App Studio. So you can find it by typing App Studio. If you do App Studio, it will show up as the first one here, and you can install it inside your Teams client. I already did it and I pinned it into my left rail. So if you open the App Studio, it gives you the ability to chat with a bot, to search for the Teams documentation. It's good, but not that good. So this is not the best functionality of this App Studio. The main point of this App Studio is the manifest editor. So with the manifest editor, you can either create a new application or you can import an existing application, being the zip file that's generated by, for example, the Yeoman generator. If you put it in here, it will show up as your recently created applications, and you can open it up. And then you can do all of the actions that are available inside the manifest. So you can give it a name, a short name, and the full name, give the app ID, the URL, some descriptions, the partner information, the branding, so the icons. You can put it all in here. So you don't have to go edit the zip file or the manifest file yourself. You can do it in here. There's also this way of adding capabilities. So in this case, there is a tab configuration URL at this URL that's available for my application. So everything can be configured in here. And at the end, you have some overall stuff available, like default language, but also additional languages that you want to add for your Teams client, the domains and permissions that you need, and then the ability to test and distribute. So in this tab, you can install your Teams application directly inside your current client. So if you click install, it will be installed here directly with side loading. You can download the adjusted zip file. So you can create a new version of this zip file through the App Studio and then upload it in another environment, for example. Or you can submit it directly into the Microsoft Teams public store for approval. Now, I don't think this gets used a lot. A good developer uses a development pipeline on DevOps or something like that to create the Teams app package and then publish it from there into the app source or the Team App Store. And then lastly, there is this validation ability. It's a recent addition. It also exists in the Team Toolkit for Visual Studio Code and the Teams app for Visual Studio, because this allows you to validate your application before you submit it into the Teams store. So it runs through all of the checklists that Microsoft will also run through while validating your application before it's made available in the public store. I won't have time to show Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, but the functionality is similar. It also allows you or guides you through some UI to decide whether you need a bot, a tab, or a messaging extension, and then scaffolds all the files necessary to start developing. Yeah, we can skip this one because I showed it live. So that brings us to the wrap up. So we did Microsoft Teams as a service, which was all about bringing Microsoft Teams to your own application. And this is built using the Microsoft Graph APIs or all the APIs that are exposed in Microsoft Graph. And then we covered Microsoft Teams as a platform where you bring your existing or new application to the Teams or the Microsoft Teams clients. And this is done with a Dapper bot, an adaptive card, a messaging extension, some task modules or connectors. So this brings me to the end. I have some resources available on the slide deck. I'm pretty sure the organizers will share the slide deck with you in some way, so I'll be sharing it with them. So you can have all the links here to get started, links to the SDKs, links to all the Graph APIs for Microsoft Teams, some getting started guides, and all the code samples and app templates that I showed you during this presentation. There is a very good Microsoft Learn module on how to build Microsoft Teams application. And since 8 months or so, we also have a Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365 developer exam available, the MS600. And there's a Microsoft Learn course that covers everything. It also covers building SharePoint applications and Outlook applications or Office add-ins. And then there's the Adaptive Cards Designer, which is a UI made available on the website where you can already create the JSON look and feel or the JSON code for your adaptive cards. So it helps you with some drag and drop to create your own themes or your own adaptive card. And then I put, the heading is wrong, but I put the links to the generator, the Omen generator, the Visual Studio Code extension, and the Teams the Visual Studio extension. Excuse me. So that brings me to the end. Thank you for joining and thank you for having me on this Dynamics focused user group. If you've got questions, feel free to reach out. So you can find me on Twitter, you can find my blog, and I'm available on LinkedIn and some other socials as well. So just connect. And I think we have some time available for open mic. So if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute, and I'm happy to help you further.
Thanks again, Yannick, and as a great introduction to the development platform for Teams. So that's something that the attendees definitely wanted to get some insight into, the art of the possible for Teams development. So thanks again for that. So as Yannick mentioned, so we have the floor open now for questions. I'm sure many of you have questions, so now's the time to ask. So please feel free to share your questions in the chat window or unmute your mic and feel free to ask your questions. If you have any, if you're still a bit ambiguous or vague about where to begin with Teams extensions and development.
And I also can do more advanced types of things. It's not because I covered only the basics in the presentation that I can't answer any more advanced questions either. So just shoot. And we'll try to get you further in your development journey.
That's correct. So Yannick did actually offer to do a more advanced session on Teams development, but we felt that an introduction session would be the best option for our community. So yes. So again, don't be shy. If you've got a question, please feel free to ask. So I guess people are still joining. Actually, looks as though people are still joining the event. It's still quite early for many people who are joining in and attending. So yes, so obviously the next session will begin in 8 minutes. We will keep Yannick for another couple more minutes for any questions. If you've got any questions, please just use a chat window. David Ole saying good session, thanks.
Thanks, Yannick. Raz, it definitely looks like it's not 100. It's definitely more information we collected in this session. It was very impressive session as well. I'm definitely looking forward to utilize all this integration, what Yannick has demonstrated, which is brilliant. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I put it as a level 100 because it covers the basics for the integration. But I can imagine that for an audience that's not used to Teams or Teams integrations, it might be overwhelming to have all of these extensibility points presented all at once. And you might have noticed I really have to speed up to get everything covered in 45 minutes. So it's not easy to get everything in here.
Absolutely. Yannick, can I ask you a favor? The links you presented in resources slide, are you able to copy paste into Teams?
For sure.
Thank you.
I'll be doing that. If there are any more questions, speak out. I do know that with this online format, people are a bit shy to speak up, but you can reach out to me afterwards as well.
Thanks again, Yannick. So Yannick's going to be sharing his links in the chat window. Also, please follow Yannick's blog. So please, Yannick, please share your blog and contact details if anyone wants to connect with you.
So the styling is a bit off when I copy paste this in the chat window, but I'm sure you will be able to figure it out. So you can find me at blog.yannickreekmans.be and on Twitter. Let me see if I can get this right without copy pasting. So this should be it. I've got some blog post covering the provisioning engine that I custom built, for example, that shows a lot of Teams interaction. It uses logic apps in the backend, not Power Automate, I'm sorry. So it's showing off all of the ways to interact, or it might give you some ideas on what to build for your own applications. And definitely check out all of the app templates or the reference solutions because they can give you a great idea on what you want to build or give you a great idea to build your own applications.
And Yannick,
yes,
where are you speaking at any other events? Where can we catch you?
I don't think. Well, let's see. On my blog, I think I only have. So let's see the Collab Summit anymore. So in Wiesbaden, given the. So this is one. Oh yeah. So I will be if it goes through September 12th. I will be in Warsaw presenting this same session again. It is postponed because it was supposed to be in March that I was doing this one. So it's still a bit unclear if I'll be there. And then there's this the European Collaboration Summit that goes on in Wiesbaden, which is a community-driven event as well. It's rather cheap. And there are 180 tickets left, I believe. And it combines Microsoft 365 and an Azure event all at once. And I'll be doing the more advanced session too. And then past events, at Comsverse, which happened this week as well. I did that advanced session too, and the recording and the slides are available, but I think it's behind the paywall, this one. So and then my other sessions are available online too. So you can just go rewatch it there as well.
Thanks again, Yannick. It was a great pleasure to meet you today, and thanks again for introducing the world of Teams development to the community.
You're welcome. It looks like a nice event. I hope I can return when I do more Power Automate or Power Apps stuff with Teams, and then I'll make sure to let you know, and then maybe I can return for some of these sessions as well.
Oh, definitely, yes. Fantastic. Thanks again. So yeah.